beneath the frigid Arctic sky, where the fiery red sunset melted into the pitch-black night, a sudden, anguished roar shattered the silence of the desolate, snow-covered wilderness. The mother bear, proud ruler of the icy plains, now lay motionless, her front paw ensnared in the cold, unforgiving jaws of a cruel trap, a relic abandoned by poachers of the past. Crimson blood stained the pristine snow, her breaths grew faint, and her desperate eyes turned toward her tiny cub trembling beside her. But in that life-or-death moment, something miraculous unfolded. The cub, with its unsteady legs and courageous heart, made the bold decision to leave its mother's side. Stepping into the icy darkness to seek salvation from the very creatures she had always warned it about: humans. Would the lone journey of this little bear bring a miracle, or lead both mother and cub to the edge of their fate? The story begins here, where love, bravery, and hope collide with the harsh law of survival in the far north. For days, the mother bear and her cub had roamed this frozen land in search of seals, their primary source of sustenance during the brutal winter. This was a remote area, with few traces of human presence. A place where the mother felt safe guiding her cub on hunting expeditions. But that morning, as she led the cub across a narrow ice crevasse, she unwittingly stepped into a trap concealed beneath a thin layer of snow. A sharp crack rang out, followed by her pained roar, sending the cub into a panic as it pressed close to her side. The mother thrashed, trying to break free, but each movement only tightened the trap's grip, drawing more blood. After hours of struggling, she collapsed, exhausted, sprawled across the snow, her labored breaths forming white clouds in the frigid air. The cub, still naive and inexperienced, didn't fully grasp what was happening. It nuzzled its mother's face, letting out soft, anxious whimpers, but she could only muster a gentle lick on its head, her gaze tender yet tinged with despair. She knew she couldn't free herself, and with each passing minute, her body weakened from blood loss and the biting cold. The cub sensed something was wrong. It stood, took a few steps around her, then returned, rubbing against her fur, once warm, now growing cold. Its small ears perked up at her faint groans, and in its young mind, it slowly realized it had to act. As the last light of day faded, leaving the Arctic cloaked in impenetrable darkness, the cub made a daring choice. It recalled the stories its mother had told of strange beings, humans, with their rumbling machines and power to change everything. She had warned it to steer clear of them, but now, in this desperate moment, the cub believed they were its only hope. With trembling little legs, it stepped away from its mother, trudging through the thick snow toward the distant flickers of light or faint engine sounds it had sometimes noticed. The cub's journey was far from easy. The Arctic night was bitterly cold, with howling winds slicing through the snow, threatening to sweep its small body away. Its feet slipped on the ice, its tender claws scraping at the snow for balance. It was hungry, cold, and scared, but the image of its mother lying helpless, her pleading eyes fixed on it, drove it forward. The cub crossed drifting ice floes and navigated deep crevasses, its ears alert to every sound. It didn't know where it was going, guided only by instinct and vague memories of times its mother had brought it near areas marked by human traces. Meanwhile, the mother bear lay there, her breaths growing shallower. The iron trap clamped her leg, each gust of wind cutting into her wound like a knife. She strained to lift her head, gazing in the direction her cub had gone, letting out a low, rumbling growl, a prayer of sorts. With all the strength she had left, she hoped her cub would find help, though she herself wasn't sure it was possible. In this icy world, life was fragile, and she was no stranger to the merciless law of survival. But this time, she wasn't fighting for herself, she was fighting for her cub, her joy, her pride, her sole reason for being. Far off, along a misty snow-covered path, an orange snowmobile rolled slowly forward. Hannah, a Swedish wildlife researcher with neatly tied brown hair and sharp, attentive eyes, sat at the helm. She wore a thick gray parka, a scarf pulled tight over her mouth to shield against the numbing cold. After 8 years working in the Arctic, Hannah knew this land well, from sudden blizzards to ice floes drifting across the sea. Tonight, she and her 3 teammates, Michael, Sophia, and Nils, were on a night survey, studying the impact of climate change on the polar bear population. They'd just been discussing how the ice was melting faster than expected, all while keeping an eye out for tracks in the snow, bear paw prints, seal drag marks, or anything unusual. Hannah carried a mix of caution and passion in her work amid the wild. She'd witness wonders like a blazing sunset over the icy sea or a cub tumbling playfully beside its mother, but she'd also faced dangers, from hungry bears lunging at her to getting lost in thick fog. For her, this job wasn't just research. It was about protecting the Arctic's incredible creatures from the growing threats of humanity and a changing environment. As the snowmobile crested a large ice ridge, Hannah suddenly slowed down, her eyes narrowing in the headlights' glow. Not far ahead, a small figure stumbled toward them. A polar bear cub, its legs shaky on the snow, its white fur streaked with icy grime. She signaled her team to stay quiet, her hand resting on the tranquilizer gun at her hip, a necessary precaution for unexpected encounters. A cub approaching a vehicle often meant danger, especially without its mother in sight. Michael, seated beside her, whispered, "Careful, the mother might be lurking nearby." But Hannah shook her head, her gut telling her something was off. When the snowmobile came to a full stop, the headlights bathed the cub in light. It stood there, wide black eyes staring, letting out soft, anxious whimpers. Hannah studied it closely, no aggression, just panic and exhaustion. The cub took a few steps closer, then abruptly turned, walking a few paces back as if urging them to follow. Hannah frowned, murmuring, "It wants us to go with it. Maybe its mother's in trouble." Sophia nodded, adding, "I've read about polar bears seeking humans in desperate situations. This could be one of those times." Hannah didn't hesitate. She turned to her team. "Grab the med kit and some rope. We're following it, but keep a safe distance." She restarted the engine, guiding the snowmobile slowly behind the cub. Her team was on edge, hands gripping their gear, ready for trouble if it came. The cub led the way, its tiny legs wobbling through the snow, occasionally glancing back to ensure they were still there. The trek stretched nearly an hour across ice ridges and crevasses, the bone-chilling cold making the team shiver, though no one complained. Finally, in the dim glow of the headlights, they spotted a large shape lying still on the snow. The mother bear was there, her front leg caught in an old iron trap, dried blood crusting around the wound. She lifted her head weakly at the sound of the engine, her pained, cloudy eyes flickering with a faint spark of hope as she saw her cub return with humans in tow. The cub rushed to her, nuzzling her face, letting out cries of joy mixed with worry. Hannah parked a few yards away and cut the engine to avoid spooking the mother. She stepped out, hands raised to show she meant no harm, whispering to her team, "She's trapped. We need to free her, but we've got to be careful." Michael and Nils grabbed the med kit and metal cutting tools, while Sophia stayed by the snowmobile, keeping watch. The mother growled softly as they approached. But it wasn't a threat, it was more like a plea, "Help me." Hannah knelt about 6 feet from the bear, inspecting the trap. It was an old iron model, the kind hunters used decades ago to catch bears, now banned but still lingering on the ice. Its jagged teeth had dug deep into the mother's leg, causing a serious wound, though thankfully the bone wasn't broken. She said to Michael, "Get the tranquilizer ready. We need her out so we can remove this thing." Michael nodded, loading a dart gun with just enough sedative to knock her out briefly. Hannah gestured for the cub to step back. It hesitated but seemed to understand, moving aside, its eyes fixed on its mother. Michael took careful aim and fired the dart into the bear's shoulder. She let out a feeble growl as the needle hit, then slowly slumped, her eyes closing, her breathing steadying. Hannah waited a few minutes to ensure the sedative had taken hold, then approached, checking the bear's pulse. "She's okay," she said, exhaling in relief. Nils brought the cutting tools and started working on the trap. The harsh clank of metal echoed in the cold air as he pried the iron jaws apart, freeing the bear's leg bit by bit. Hannah held the leg steady, careful not to worsen the injury. Fresh blood seeped out as the trap came off, but she quickly cleaned the wound with saline and applied antiseptic. The cub stood nearby, whimpering softly as if comforting its mother. Hannah pulled gauze from the med kit and wrapped the bear's leg tightly to stop the bleeding and protect the wound. She checked it over once more, ensuring no metal fragments remained. "She'll recover, but it'll take time," she told her team. Michael nodded. "Good thing we got here when we did. She could have lost the leg, or worse." Sophia chimed in, "That cub's brave. I've never seen anything like it." After about an hour, the sedative began to wear off. The mother stirred, her eyes opening slowly. Hannah and her team stepped back, giving the pair space. The cub bounded over, rubbing against her, letting out joyful cries. The mother lifted her head, looked at her cub, then glanced at the humans standing a short distance away. She didn't growl or snarl, just sat there, silent as if offering a wordless thank you. Hannah smiled, feeling a warmth cut through the Arctic chill. She turned to her team. We did it. Let's leave them be. They climbed back onto the snowmobile, started the engine, and drove off slowly. In the rearview mirror, Hannah saw the mother stand, her injured leg still weak but functional. She nuzzled her cub, and together they walked off, their shapes fading into the night's fog. Back at the research station, Hannah logged the entire event, time, location, the mother's condition, for a report to the Wildlife Conservation Group. She knew the bear would need weeks to fully heal, but with her resilience and the cub's courage, they'd make it. That day, the tale of Hannah, the dedicated researcher, and the gutsy little cub spread through the Arctic scientific community. It was a testament to unconditional love, sacrifice, and the incredible bond between humans and wild nature, even in the harshest of circumstances. In Hannah's heart, the image of that cub leading the way through the snow would remain a beautiful memory, a reminder of the power of hope and trust.